Let me introduce you to our final guest of the morning. His name is Mark Klein. For 22 years, he worked for AT&T, much of that in the San Francisco Bay Area at the 611 Folsom Street facility that the company has there. He's involved in the debate that the country is having over the National Security Agency's wiretapping program, and very specifically from your own personal experience. Mr. Klein, I'm going to ask you briefly to tell our audience your own story.
Well, I was in Folsom Street towards the end, not all 22 years, but I was a communications technician for 22 years. A lot of my job, particularly in the last few years, was to keep the network up, and I was one of the technicians that they'd call for if there was a problem, trouble, or an emergency, and I would change equipment, check lines, communications lines. That was basically my job.
And somewhere along the line, you became concerned about your company's involvement with the National Security Agency.
Right. One day we were told an agent from the NSA was coming to interview a management-level technician for a secret job, which we didn't know what it was for. But after a few weeks and months, we learned he was working on a secret facility that was installed at the Folsom Street office, which I arrived at that office about a year later. So by the time I arrived there, I already knew there was something secret going on.
And what did you come to learn about that program?
Well, I was assigned to the Internet room, so I was on top of the equipment. And one of the central pieces of equipment there was what they call a splitter. And the major Internet cables that carry everybody's Internet traffic, phone conversations, email, were run through this splitter, and what all the splitter does is make a copy of the entire data stream. It does not select anything in particular. It makes a copy, and that copy is sent down to the secret room. That's what the engineering documents show.
And so the net effect of this is what was happening.
What was happening, the effect of this was, it was a vacuum cleaner sweep of the entire Internet data flow going into the secret room. There's no selection here at all. It's domestic traffic as well as international traffic, all mixed together. And so it could be everybody, your email to your grandma or somebody abroad making an email. So there's no selection. It's all mixed together. And
when you spoke to your managers about your concerns, what did they say?
Well, by the time I got there, it was already established, and it was clearly a secret operation. And it didn't seem like a smart idea to ask a lot of questions about it. And I had just saved my job by getting into that office at the last minute. So I didn't want to make a big stink about what was going on there. I just made some mental notes. But it disturbed me that they were copying everything. And this includes phone conversations as well as email.
At the same time that Americans were being told what about the program?
Well, at that time, Americans were being told practically nothing.
Because it hadn't been in the press yet.
After I retired, and then in December '05, when the New York Times revealed that there was some big warrantless spying program going on, then I felt maybe I should come forward with what I know, because what the White House was saying was not true. The White House was trying to portray it as they're just looking at international communications of a handful of people who might be making phone calls to the Middle East or something like that. And actually, I knew they're looking at a huge amount of domestic communications, and it's not a handful of people. It's millions of Americans' ordinary communications.
And certainly, you must have had some pause before coming forward. A single individual in criticizing the government for a national security program. What gave you finally gave you the courage to say, I'm going to put your hand up and I'm going to talk about this?
Well, certainly it helped when the New York Times came out with part of it, so that gave me a sort of more credibility and confidence that there's might be people out there on my side before you go out and by yourself making charges against the government or the company you had worked for. New York Times revelations helped spur me, and then at the same time I was rather enraged at the way the White House tried to basically misdirect people about the scope and breadth and depth of this program. They tried to minimize it as if it's just about a few international phone calls, and it's much broader and deeper than that. One of my colleagues who was at the press conference yesterday described it as, it's not a wiretap, it's a country tap.
And one of the groups that helped to support you was the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which has been very much involved in this debate in the country over the wireless surveillance program. What has your experience been like since you've come forward? Just in general about
Well, I've certainly, it's a new experience for me to talk to a lot of media, and until I got here in Washington, though, I hadn't heard anything from Congress. We had sent letters and emails to various senators, and Feinstein and Leahy, Specter, and never gotten any answers. For a year and a half we've been trying. So now that I'm in Washington and we're here to talk to Congress and tell them not to give immunity to the telecom companies, we have been able to talk to some senators and their staffs and maybe get the word out.
I want to get to telephone calls and have you involved in this conversation. We have about 17 minutes left in our program or so. But let me give you some up-to-date information about Congress on this issue from today's Congress Daily publication. As the Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Leahy has decided to wait at least a week to vote on the controversial proposal to shield telecommunications companies from lawsuits for helping the Bush administration spy on U.S. residents without warrants, lawmakers and aides said. His committee instead will meet today and mark up only the first title of the Senate Intelligence Committee bill that would change the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. That title addresses the amount of oversight the secret FISA court should have over the administration's warrantless electronic surveillance activities. The second title, which grants retroactive legal immunity to telecommunications companies that have given the administration phone and email records of U.S. citizens without warrant, will not be considered until next week at the earliest. Any reaction to that?
Well, that makes me feel like maybe we've had a teeny bit of impact, because before I got here, it sounded like they were going to ram it all through a few days ago, and it would, be over and done with. But since we got here, now I hear they're postponing it to next week, so maybe all the media coverage is help spur them to at least to look a little closer and move more slowly.
You're going to likely hear calls, because we get them frequently, from viewers who say, I have done nothing wrong. The threat of international terrorism is so great that I would prefer this program proceeds. What would your response be to people with that opinion?
There's plenty of provisions in the FISA law for emergency moments when the government could come in without a warrant for a brief period if they had a true emergency. But I don't think that this is what it's about. They're talking about, they've installed permanent installations to collect people's communications forever. One assumes they store this stuff. And if they just wanted to look at international communications, these facilities are in the wrong place. Like downtown San Francisco is not the place you'd put a facility like this if you just wanted international communications. You'd put it closer to the border where the cables come in from the ocean.
I'd like to involve the audience in this since we have so little time. I didn't tell you beforehand, but we have a group of students, high school students, who are watching our program in California, and they're going to ask some questions as well. We have one of those students right now on the phone with us who has a question for you. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My name is Samantha Crias, and I am a senior at James Monroe Law and Government Magnet. And I personally believe that wiretapping is a violation of our Fourth Amendment constitutional rights. And because I will be voting for the first time in the upcoming 2008 election, I want to know what I, as a new voter, can do to prevent further infringement of my rights.
Well, the first thing you can do is tell all your senators and congressmen not to give immunity to the telecom companies, because at this point it looks like the best way for the information to come out as to the what they're doing, the kind of surveillance they're doing, is the lawsuit that I'm a witness for. And if Congress passes immunity, that would cut off that lawsuit and it would never come out. So the first thing I would say to you is, tell all your senators and congressmen to not give immunity to the telecom companies.
Here's another proposal about how to approach this from Senator Arlen Specter. This is from the same publication I quoted earlier. Last week, Senator Arlen Specter floated an alternative to a grant of immunity by suggesting Congress indemnify the telecommunications firms, meaning that the civil suits against them would be allowed to proceed, but that the government would cover any damages, which could reach $30 billion.
Well, I might differ with EFF on this. They might be willing to go along with that.